thank you for the introduction. Many places where I could get lost, and I'm lost again with this topic, I have to say, in some way. And so far that in general we speak or we are confronted with a paradox. On the one hand, we have a certain understanding of law, of jurisprudence, what it is. It is in actual fact highly abstract, beginning with the presumption that it is possible to grasp the complexity of individual and social societal life in a formal approach. And this is necessarily linked to equalization, fading out all these complexities. And still we think it is concrete, we know what the law is about, and we have a certain understanding in this way. On the other side, the following presentation seems to be very abstract because it does not refer immediately to these known understandings. I think it requires to step outside of what we usually say. I just finished reading a book on artificial intelligence and the future, basically, where one human being, there is a human being left, says, always he says, people have learned by coming into contact with other opinions, other ideas, other worldviews, and they only learn this way. What are you getting at? Asked Julia. You can only learn something when you come across something you don't know yet. That should be without saying. And now you come, artificial intelligence, and tell me it's not a problem if people are only bombarded with their own opinions. Peter turns to the audience in the studio. Everything everyone hears from us is only an echo of which we have shouted out into the world. It's Quality Land, the book, and I think it shows exactly the problem in science as well. To some extent, we are caught in our definitions that we have, and we are afraid to move outside of the box, as it is said. And a very provocative question then is, looking at nature, at artificial intelligence, is there any at least good reason for the relevance and importance of human beings in the universe? Any reason that shows the necessity or desirability to survive? But already this formulation of the question is highlighting the problematic. A misguided understanding is behind it, rationality as utilitarian take on existence. If you ever read Douglas Adams he's talking about the puddle. Everything is made for the puddle until everything disappears, including the puddle. We have a misunderstanding of human beings, seeing themselves as a center of everything, establishing an anthropocentric worldview, and as well the planet. Intellectually, we know that it is not the center of everything, and subconsciously we still think it is. It had been Sigmund Freud talking about this as major frustrations as a consequence of qualifications of human beings and the planet Earth. Now there comes another disappointment, frustration. Human power, we think it is unquestionable and unlimited ability. In individual cases, we fail, we are not healing everybody, but in general we think we can do everything, perceived as almightiness. With this, Konrad Paul Liessmann, an Austrian philosopher, said, we had been confronted with the pandemics as questioning this almightiness as well. There seems to be another paradox. As more as we, as human beings, are becoming aware of the fact of limits, of these limits, of the scope and reach of our actions, as more we are in fact losing the ability to control the power we have. And this entails, and there I come to one of the core theses, this entails an increasing awareness of the loss of our self-understanding as social beings, as more as we are interwoven in interrelationalities as less we accept them. Individualization, cocooning, singularization, and with all these different kinds of arbitrariness, we can just do what we want. Again, the paradox of all this culminates in what I want to call self-creation of and self-establishment of arbitrary and almightiness of individuals. Coming back to the quality land, she would be omniscient. And of course, it would be possible for her to change not only the virtual world, but since almost everything can be controlled by the internet, our physical world as well, entirely at her will. She would be omnipotent. Now tell me, what do you call a being that is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent? God? Asked Peter. The old man smiles. Yes, now you understand what I mean when I say that in an ironic twist of all that religions have tried to teach us, it is not God who created men, but men who will create for himself a God. You will see later what this has to do with the question of new approaches in law. And of course we are dealing with very complex ontological and epistemological issues, also meaning we tend to answer the question easily in a simplified way. Being aware of this, I dare to propose as major origins of this shortcoming. Philosophy, the Cartesian sharp distinction between subject and object. The subsequent nearing of the eclipse of reason, which Max Horkheimer eloquently reflected upon, the subsequent multidimensional alienation we all live through every day, and not least the move of academia to positivism, now prevailing in science and social science, although I never liked this distinction between science and social science. Now, alienation as a societal problem. As I said, it's a multidimensional character of alienation, which deserves following brief elaboration at least. We have to distinguish different dimensions of it. Labor alienation, the worker as consequence of the shift from use value-led processes of the production of exchange value. We don't produce what we use, we produce what we can exchange. And with this, the truncation of exchange value-led activities from use value-led production. Then we find economic alienation, alienation of the exchange value-led productive processes from use value production. With this, truncation of managing from regulating and controlling productive processes. Then we find in another dimension organizational alienation, alienation of organizations from set goals and objectives as a result of administrative sovereignty. They can do what they want. Truncation of management tasks and their externalization. Then political alienation as management from requirement of regulating life and living, alienation from that, and truncation of a self-reflexive political system oriented towards and defined by the goal of maintenance of power, establishing itself as politico-administrative system, increasingly independent from the socio-economic fabric. Now we find a double movement with this alienation. On the one hand, it's the classical Marxian approach, the alienation of the worker. Don't want to engage much in this. I want to show another dimension, that alienation today is as well alienation of the upper classes and not least of academic circles, spreading from there into society. Here it is about the awareness of the limits of power, including the reflection of Easterlin paradox, easily said, money does not make happy. And it is about the pathological illusion clinging to the idea of one's own omnipotence and immortality. trying to fight mortality, we invest so much time by using pharmaceutical products and, that we actually don't gain anything with it because we invested just in maintaining ourselves. Now there is a broad economic background to it, and it is the increasing denaturalization of the economy as a matter of production, being less concerned with the production and reproduction of people's daily life, and it is increasingly a self-referential process. A short quote from Walter Womack's autobiography, an artist, showing what I mean. The income for additional jobs he got had been a welcome supplement, and as the tax law had been simple and easily manageable, everything had been well ordered. 20% of each of these payments had been deducted and immediately paid by the client. Thus, the state did not request using time for meaningless tax calculations. Different to now. One did not even need a beer mat to do this calculation, and the time saved could be usually employed for really important things. Now look here at your tax declaration, look at the bureaucratic administrative effort to get your old age pensions, if you get one, and all this. Huge processes of work, but at the same time deducting this time from what we really need. In short, whereas administration and regulation had been originally mere auxiliaries, enhancing labor as metabolism, it gained increasingly existence in its own right. Coming back to the initial question, indeed there is no need for human beings to exist, not at least from the perspective of the universe. You see, I read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker Through the Galaxy. This means in turn we must refrain from seeing the world made for us. And equally wrong is to see ourselves as being made for the universe. Moving a step further, we must overcome the underlying notion of any utilitarian approach, simply accepting that we do exist, that we want to exist, and most importantly, that we only do exist as part of the universe of which we are part, and of the universe that has an existential right in its own. This means not least that we must refer to the right not as right to exist, but as right to coexist. And this translates into the need to overcome the dichotomy of subject and object, Cartesian approach, seeing subject and object as entity. Now I quote, according to Spinoza, every existing thing is part of a whole, which is itself part of a still greater whole, and everything it contained in the greatest whole to be assumed in God or nature, Deus sive natura, as he said. However, every existing thing is also something for itself that organizes itself in relation to the external on which it depends. In ethics, Spinoza uses the term conatus, striving to persist in its being, to define its selfhood, this selfhood of each individual. This also applies to man. Although he is not state within a state, he is, like the stones, the plants, and the animals, part of the all-encompassing nature. In other words, no special provision applies to him, but the general laws of nature. His behavior, like all natural phenomena, follows the laws of causality, knowledge of which is sufficient to understand it. And this is important, that there is the other side to it, namely creativity. In short, this challenges in a fundamental way the view on nature and increasingly the view as well on artificial intelligence as external forces that are at most passive, only reacting. One of the challenges is that both today's nature and today's technologies in forms of artificial intelligence, digitization systems are shaped by humans. Up to now, we thought we are the gods, we are almighty, we can shape it. But what we shaped, or the interest behind it, had been economic interest, so very limited approach. In the case of nature, we are dealing with a nature that is already deformed by these interests, and in the case of artificial intelligence, digitization, we are currently still deforming it. The voices of nature, we heard this earlier, are coming across in a very violent form. The voice of extreme rain, wildfires, melting Arctic ice. While there's no reason for any dystopia, there's a very strong reason still to underline this fact that it is man-made. We are responsible up to now. It means that we, as humans, are in a position of defining the stop rule as well. Not acknowledging this means that we are entering a wrong path, namely one that maintains the status quo, juxtaposing humans, nature, and technology. This is today misleading as it had been historically when the Luddites destroyed the machines, or in other words, in actual fact, they hit the messenger. Finally, their problem had not been the machine as such, but it had been the use to undermine their existence. And this is what we do with nature. And the interest behind it, I quote Polanyi, in the 19th century, civilization alone was economic in a distinctive sense, for it chose to base itself on a motive only rarely acknowledged as valid in the history of human societies, and certainly never before raised to the level of justification of action and behavior in everyday life, namely gain. The self-regulating market system was uniquely derived from this principle. There was no social control anymore. And paradoxically or not, and due to whichever constellations, one of the main contradictions of human existence so far is that between humans as individuals, acting in a time frame of a maximum of 4 generations, and humankind with a non-final time perspective. Now coming to the law side, and we have to accept that we have to overcome, again, to emphasize this juxtaposition of nature there, artificial intelligence there, and we as humans, we are the only subjects. We have to stop seeing nature as something external, still going hand in hand with the myth of fire-breathing dragons and lightning-wielding gods. And we have to stop to see artificial intelligence external as ex machina, if you ever saw this film, or Draculanian power gases. Now I would like to engage a little bit, or pointing out a little bit what we have. We have climate court cases in respect of climate. They all point back on our interest, the interest of future generations, the interest of certain areas, regions, but there is nothing about the right of nature. And this is, I think, a major problem for law. Now I would like to show the slides, or the slide, if you can do this, please, which confronts the two sides. On the one hand, or the current main characteristics of jurisprudence, and then what I think the way we have to go. Can you share the screen?
No, we did. You have to share. You have to share the screen.
I have to do this.
Yeah.
No, I think he cannot because he does not have permission.
Okay.
I think you are the only one who has the permission.
Yeah.
Okay.
It works.
It's okay now. Yeah.
Okay. So in black, basically, you see what we have now, the current mainstream approach, and in red, then where I think we have to go. And we have to discuss it. It's not an easy thing. Coercive enforcement of law by the state. That's what we have. But I think it is the strict orientation on a balanced appropriateness, not in the name of the people speaking law, but by the orientation on concerned subjects and in the interest of sustainable existence. Then the second characteristics of law today is the enforcement of law by means of formal proceedings, in particular court proceedings, but also administrative proceedings, decision-making and enforcement of decisions. What we need is an enforcement of law by discursive processes. We cannot say this is just a form and this we have to fulfill. This is procedure and this is the most important. We have to think along the line of what I call a time-reversed common law procedure, not referring to previous judgments, but looking what is the judgment of the future with all the interested parts, actors. Then we have the written fixation of law. It's not absolute necessary, but it is most likely in the current system. And I think we have to orient, or we need the orientation on written guidelines, exploring criteria for solving conflicts, and we always are dealing with conflicts, balancing the interests along the lines of sustainability. And this is, of course, the standard term today, sustainability, but taking nature seriously as such, not in our interest, and the same taking artificial intelligence seriously as such. How can we use it and how can we work together with it instead of allowing it to take over, to arrive at a new singularity, if you want. Fourth characteristic, the establishment of law in a special procedure as a matter of democratic legitimation. Sounds good, but establishing a discursive procedure securing all relevant actors, times and locations that are involved in the process of judging. Relevant means those that are immediately relevant today, but also those that are indirectly concerned. Today, here and now, tomorrow, somewhere else, and in the future. The orientation towards the realization of justice. The orientation, what we need, is towards a realization of sustainability, taking the following dimensions into account. Social justice, appropriateness, respecting the interest of different subject matters, not subjects, come later back to this, reflecting of spatial conditions, which are different in different regions, at different times, and the reflection of time. And we should not stop with these criteria. We should always be open to add new criteria. Then the final characteristic is the legal certainty as characteristic of law. It follows from the enforceability and the fixation of content, also including the possibility that the individual can enforce his or her right, if necessary by force. Again, sounds good, but legal disputability is what we need, following the tenet of any system geared towards justice. Cui bono, guiding the two questions, unde venis and quo vadis. From where do we come and where do we want to go? This means that we have to redefine as well the subject, bringing together the legal subject and the societal subject, what matters in society. What we have now is the subject must be able to have rights and obligations under the law. Now a little bit provocation again, going beyond formal equality. That's what we need. Accepting the ability to have legal rights and obligations is very much a matter of power along the lines of capability and appropriateness. Even if we have the same law, legal conditions, it does not mean the same for everybody. We can speak of the need to move from formal assessment to the resubstantialized understanding of subjects, referring to the meaning of central category. Just a reminder, the famous majestic equality of law forbidding everybody to sleep under the bridges. That's valid for the poor person as well as for the rich. I think it had been another force. Second, the subject today must be able to act in their own name. Seen and heard as actor is in its own right, standing in a causal, though creative relationship to others. The relationality of human beings, nature and artifacts. That's what I think we need. We have to think about. The third point, legal subjects must be able to sue and to be sued in court. But what we need is not the limitation to the court cases. We have to acknowledge all players as actors, referring to their impact and the prospective consequences for other players, and just and sustainable balance between them. Of course, we cannot bring or allow a tree to come to court and sue somebody or being sued, but we have to think for the existing, for the right of the trees, for the right of nature, for the right attained by them as subjects in their own terms. Finally, the subject has to be held liable for their actions. I think the subject must be approached as subject matters, as I've said before, instead of applying it in a reduced understanding of an acting subject immediately being responsible. With this, accepting them only as conscious being. So I think this is a guideline for future discussions we have to engage in. And I say at the same time, I do not want to deny the success story of positive law. And I also say this without denying the operational difficulties of moving such a way forward. But looking at easy, simple solution is not what we need. And in this way, I want to conclude with a quote from John Stuart Mill in his book on utilitarianism. Probably many of you heard it or read it. It's better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are of a different opinion, it is because they only know their own side of the question. The other party of the comparison knows both sides. And I think we know that the way we move forward in the way we treat nature, in the way we use artificial intelligence, and in the way we use law is, I would provocatively end here saying, foolish. Thank you very much.